The next speaker is an independent journalist, one of the most powerful, influential people in my mind, providing real news, the founder of Press for Truth, confronting the globalists and their elite plan to enslave humanity for over 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mr. Dan Dix.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I know there was some partying last night. There was the Turtle Place. There was a David Icke dinner. But you guys are here at 10 o'clock in the morning. Looking like you're not too hungover, so that's great. Thank you for being here. and especially on this particular stage here in the advocacy room. Now, for those of you who maybe have been coming to my talks for the last 5 years, you may have noticed that I'll often look back on the previous years and I'll try to analyze basically where we've come over the past year and try to figure out if we're in a good place now or not. And last year I touched on this idea that we all have this archetypal hero to which we look up to on a subconscious level. And I want to stress the importance of having a good role model in order to be a good role model. So this year, I want to stress that message once again, but with some much needed updates in regards of the 2019 information war. Now, that may sound familiar to you because you may have heard of InfoWars from Alex Jones, Infowars.com, and we could obviously debate and discuss all day long about what he brings to the table or doesn't bring to the table, but we cannot deny the fact that he was essentially erased from the internet. Alex Jones was memory hold, and that should have been really scary. That should have been a stark warning to everyone in this room when that happened to him, because he actually represented the first domino to fall. And it wasn't that long after Alex Jones was removed from the internet, essentially, that we saw the great independent media purge of Facebook of 2018, where the Free Thought Project, Cop Block, Police to the Police, Anti-Media, these types of pages, and Press for Truth was purged from Facebook. I had 350,000 followers there who just disappeared, like in the blink of an eye. They were just gone, and these are people who depended on Press for Truth for their news. And it's because the powers that ought not to be do not want you guys to be informed. YouTube's really no better. They're going back on their commitment to free speech if they ever had one. I'm constantly being shadow banned now on YouTube. I don't get recommended in the recommendations feed anymore. It doesn't even matter if you click on the little notification bell anymore. In fact, the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, and the Southern Poverty Law Center consider my content hate speech. So yeah, it's not looking good with Facebook or YouTube at this moment. But I sometimes sit back and wonder what happened to me on Facebook and what's happening to my YouTube channel. I realize it really is a blessing in disguise. I touched on this a little bit in my panel discussion the other day, because as we know, Facebook is a massive spying database. We know they're tracking and tracing and databasing every single thing about everyone, probably understanding you on an emotional and spiritual level more than you even know yourself. And YouTube really should just be called ThemTube now. They're really trying to please their friends at Silicon Valley more than the creators who helped build the platform. So the question, I guess, is how do we turn this around? How do we, as freedom-loving, independent-minded, liberty-loving individuals, turn this around while staying true to the principles of anarchy and individual liberty? So I want to propose three things. First, I would say we really need to install a healthy distrust of the state in every single person we come across, and any of the actors that are involved with them. And number two, we need to recognize wounded soldiers in the info war, and we have to know when to help them and when to move on to the next wounded soldier in the info war. And number three, we need to become disciples of truth and teach other people how to become disciples of truth so they can effectively carry this message about individual freedom and individual liberty. So for the first one, when it comes to trying to awaken people to statism, we have to realize that statism very much is like a disease. It's kind of like Stockholm syndrome, where they identify with their captors and they don't really see the the spell that they're under, and we have to regard it as such. Now, when you're speaking with someone like that, it's important. There's certain tactics you can use. And one of the best tactics you can use is something called the Socratic method. This is something I talked about a couple years ago at Anarchapulco. So I just want to briefly give you the lowdown definition of that so you can just understand how it works. So the Socratic method is a method of hypothesis elimination, in that better hypotheses are found by steadily identifying and eliminating those that lead to contradictions. The Socratic method searches for general, commonly held truths that shape beliefs and scrutinizes them to determine their consistency with other beliefs. The basic form is a series of questions formulated as a test of logic and fact intended to help the person or group discover their beliefs about some topic, exploring definitions or logos, and seeking to characterize general characteristics shared by various particular instances. So this isn't a debate. You don't want to be shouting at people. You want to bring across your message in a calm and rational manner, because it's often a tough pill for people to swallow. People need to come to the realization of this type of information on their own half the time. So the Socratic method is a great way to do that. Now that brings us on to number 2, how to recognize a wounded soldier in the info war. And it's a funny thing about the awakening process. It's something we've all been through. It's something we're all currently going through. And it's something that requires you to swallow an element of your pride. You sometimes have to admit that maybe you don't have all the answers. Maybe you don't have things all figured out the way you should. And that's hard. That's a tough pill for some people to swallow. So it has to be done carefully. In the case of my family, my sister, for example, was interested in health issues. So I would tell her all about vaccines. And my dad was interested in finance, so I would teach him about fiat banking and the Rothschilds and eventually Bitcoin. And my mom was always more spiritual leaning, so I would talk to her about the occult influences in secret societies and things of that nature. And so I planted those seeds, and they all went down their own rabbit holes and came to their own conclusions about the problems of the world, and felt that they discovered it on their own, which is important. Some people, however, you can present facts on a silver platter, and they will just look at it and reject it as garbage. Now, these are the wounded soldiers in the info war that we have to leave by the wayside. I mean, you can spend a lot of time trying to wake up a brainwashed individual. The statism runs deep in many. So sometimes you just have to know when to move on to the next person who is capable of taking those seeds that you plant and sprouting them. Like Ron Paul, look what Ron Paul was able to do. He's woken up millions and millions of people, literally millions of people, to the ideas of individual freedom and liberty. And perhaps one of the most exciting things that he actually did was he inspired other people to then go on and become their own influential leaders in the movement. And that is the most exciting thing. And that brings me to number 3, how to make disciples of truth in the age of media censorship. Now, it's important to effectively be able to carry your message. And as I said last year, I take it back to that archetypal hero equation, where we all emulate someone in behavior. So if you want to be a good role model and able to influence people, you have to have a good role model. And the good news today is there was actually a perfect model provided for how one should conduct their lives if they want true individual freedom and liberty. This was actually already shown for us a couple thousand years ago by a man named Jesus Christ. I would actually argue that he laid out the perfect example for how somebody should conduct themselves if they want true freedom, individual liberty, and freedom from oppression from the government. I would argue he provided the perfect example for how you can achieve that. So I guess in a nutshell, to wrap it up, I would challenge you, when you leave this kind of a conference, to try these 3 tactics. I mean, try number 1, waking up the status, but doing it in a calm and rational manner, utilizing the Socratic method. Number 2, recognizing the wounded soldiers in the info war and recognizing when it's time to move on to the next guy. And number 3, having a good role model in order to be a good role model so that we can influence people to become influencers themselves. And then maybe after we do all that, we can lead towards having true freedom, true individual liberty from the government, and all those things will follow once we take care of these things first. So that's my message for today, guys. So thank you for coming. Now, we have 15 more minutes, so we're going to be opening up to a Q&A. If anybody has any questions, knock them out.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Dix, one more time. So if you have some questions, feel free to shout them out, or we can just do it like this here.
Either way, yeah. So when you said recognize the wounded soldiers and know when to leave them behind, can you talk more about what you meant by that?
All right, so I had a roommate once who was a doctor of psychology, and he had a master's in economics, and he was a really smart guy. Every single time we had these types of discussions, it always resulted in us having to just agree to disagree. And I eventually realized that there was some sort of a blocker that he had. There was some sort of a wall, and I think it came from the educational institution. They somehow taught him, here's how you deal with these kind of people. So before I could even, explain anything, the blocker was already up. You're a conspiracy theorist, crazy guy. So those are the wounded soldiers in the info war who you could just keep trying. I lived with a guy for 3 years, and our discussions never got anywhere. That's what I'm referring to. Sometimes you can spend a lot of time trying to influence somebody like that. You're better off influencing somebody who might actually, get involved.
I have a question, just to follow up on that though. When he saw you doing your work for 3 years and saw the support that you garnered in that time, did that change his mind at all?
He was one of these heavily indoctrinated, seriously brainwashed individuals. So no, not like as I said, you could present facts on a silver platter, and he would just reject it as being junk food and garbage. That's at the point when you say, you know what, it's time to move on to somebody. My time is better spent elsewhere.
There's simple terms for solving it though. Intellectual dishonesty, calling people out. Did you attempt to try that?
I've attempted everything with this guy. Like I said, I lived with him for 3 years. I tried it all, and then I eventually realized he ain't gonna make it. I need to move on.
Why is he not making it?
Why is he not making it? Because there was something done to him in the educational system at university. He had a doctor of philosophy and a master of economics, and he was incapable of having a rational discussion about these things. So I chalk it up to the education system.
Yeah, there was a quick side note here. Larkin Rose in his workshop, he said, doctors don't heal bones. Doctors align the bones and the body heals itself. So he said some people you explain to them whatever it is, but they have to go let that information process.
Mm-hmm.
You can line up the bones, but if they go and break their foot again, it happens.
That's a good point, and let's not forget, all those discussions were little tiny seeds. Yes. So who knows? Maybe those will sprout someday. Maybe he'll have an epiphany in a few years from now, and he'll say, oh my God, those things Dan was telling me were right. But he'll need to come to it on his own.
Good. Another question?
Yeah, actually, can you describe or explain, maybe show us the method of, this Socratic method of working with an individual? I'm just curious how you might do that. Because I'm from San Francisco, so I have a
The best thing to do is to basically ask questions that will challenge them to where they're going to find holes in their own theory. So when there's certain issues with where they're going on their particular topic, you got to figure out the questions that are going to poke holes in their theory and get them to analyze what they actually believe. So the method is really trying to turn it back onto them and to use questions in order to poke holes in their own theory.
Another question? Robert?
Yeah, so first off, great work. Thank you so much for all of it. You've wrestled with these guys, YouTube, etc., for years. Is there a way to kind of jujitsu these guys and start to use their own platforms against them in the sense that, in the technology world, I came from an IT background, DDoS attacks, which are distributed denial of service attacks.
Mhm.
It's basically lots of people flooding, something to prevent it from working. Maybe you could do the same thing and say, how do we turn around and say, I'm going to distribute your content through everybody in this friggin' room on their own YouTube channels. All right, YouTube, go friggin' nuts shutting everybody down from making the same statements.
Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, I've taken the approach of diversifying my video sharing platform portfolio, so to speak, into a whole slew of other blockchain-based decentralized platforms that are censorship resistant. So it's not so much about knocking YouTube for what they're doing bad. It's more so about saying, all right, you know what, there's better options out here. So I would explore Minds.com, BitChute, BitTube, DTube. There's a lot of these alternative decentralized blockchain-based platforms that are sort of censorship resistant, because once it's on the blockchain, it's there forever. So I would suggest migrating the audience from one platform to the other, and let YouTube do its thing, but hopefully we can build up these other platforms and support these other people who create these platforms that believe in true free speech.
Yeah. Another question? Okay.
Do you believe in the platform that Ben Swan was talking about, Isagoria, I think it was?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. I did an interview with Ben about that a couple of months ago, and I really like the concept. It's still in beta. They haven't launched anything, but yeah, I'm excited to see what that's going to be. In fact, at this conference, I've already been pitched 3 platforms that are all about to be launched in the next 6 months. So there's a number of platforms that are being built right now to deal with this problem, and that's the beautiful thing about the free market. I think we're starting to see for the first time in real life, we're starting to see the free market and how it actually operates. So it's a beautiful thing. So yeah, Isagoria, I'm very interested in, and get ready for a whole bunch more too.
Another question? Here we go.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Will Surtak, and it seems that there's a lot of people that are very comfortable in the state that they're in, be it financially or where they're living, or their relationships. Now, if the psychological truism is that people are more motivated to move away from pain than they are to go towards pleasure. It is a truism. So in my case, and my wife especially, we had a trauma that 11 years ago, be it we lost our house, the job, cancer, loss of a child. That was the spark. Now, we were somewhat born different. We knew it inherently. There was something wrong with us. And with the trauma, it sparked that change, that now we look more critically at what's around us. Is there a way to impose some kind of an artificial or real trauma to somebody? Subliminally, perhaps.
Right. Okay, so the question is, how do we get people to hit rock bottom? No, that's a very good point that you make. Like I said, statism is like a disease, like Stockholm syndrome, and sometimes people have to hit rock bottom, just like an alcoholic or a druggie. Sometimes that's what it takes in order to realize your true problem. How to spark something like that, I don't know. I think it's going to be different based on the individual from person to person. What happened to you maybe was the right thing that needed to happen to you in order to spark that. But that might not necessarily work for somebody else, right? So it's kind of difficult to figure out what that might be for everyone. But very good point.
Another question? About 6 more minutes.
Actually, can I comment first? As far as like alcoholism, they call it raising the bottom. And the way that you raise the bottom for alcoholic is you try to show them basically where it's going to end up, so they can see down the road before they get down the road.
Awesome.
I'm wondering, to build on this gentleman's idea about using the platform against itself, so to speak, I'm wondering why we don't have more like kind of redirecting videos on our YouTube channels, pointing to other video channels.
We do have that. One of the ones I love the most is BitChute, BitChute, and they have an RSS feed, so it pulls directly from my YouTube channel. So I don't do anything.
Actually, on YouTube, like have a video to our YouTube viewers saying, check out this video. This on the website.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's what I do now in pretty much every video. In fact, I have in my default settings all the new platforms that I'm on, and I'm constantly trying to migrate my audience over the new ones. In fact, I'm always collecting emails as well, because the day is going to come where they're just going to pull me from YouTube. It's going to happen. It's inevitable. So I need to be able to contact each and every one of you on an individual level to be able to say, hey, because you guys are going to wake up one day and say, oh, where's Press for Truth? I want to be able to email you and say, I'm over here on Minds, or I'm over here on BitChute now. So that's important.
Are you guys certain that YouTube?
One second. Ernie?
I think you're right. But there, you go, hey, we're over here to tell you we're over there. But there has to be an over there. And that's what he's doing, is all these different over there's. And I don't think it's time yet to find, if there is going to be even one, but it's time to start looking for those. And I'm glad that's why I'm here. Dan is saying, hey, we're not here, we're over like other places. By this time next year, I think you will see 1 to 5 or 10 or whatever that will be over everywhere else. And I don't know what's going to happen in the current system, the way they got it, but I'm not really worried either.
Dan?
Yeah, another question?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm curious. We're a group of anarchists, but we all believe in individuals. YouTube is a privately owned business, and yet you guys want to force them to do things how you would choose to have it done.
We don't want to force them to do anything.
Well, I know you don't, but everybody complains about YouTube. Just go somewhere else and stop using them. That's how it changes.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement here. I think we're all on the same page there that non-compliance is the answer. We don't need to have regulations on them. We don't need some sort of, to use the state against them, certainly.
I would agree with that. And
Is
the
it?
other comment that I would make is what we're doing is fantastic, and I certainly believe in maximizing individual freedom to whatever point you're comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
I don't personally agree that there's not going to be some sort of ruler. For me, it's Jesus Christ. So if Jesus Christ, with all the power that he had to be able to affect things, couldn't and wouldn't make everybody become a Christian, I don't know that we're going to have much success making everybody else into an anarchist. So the concept, out of the Bible, the New International Version, is do not give dogs what is sacred, do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under your feet and turn and tear you to pieces, which is what you said earlier. So.
Amen.
Yeah. One distinction I think between these platforms is that they're censoring content and then become a publisher, which means the platform you can post anything. So they're censoring accurate data and facts because it's controversial, but who cares? We deserve to have information, whether it's inaccurate or accurate.
Yeah.
Question,
I just want to see, I wonder if you're aware of different tools out there. Because I stumbled across this kid who's 20 years old, and apparently I was his first subscriber to this platform. And what you do is you upload a video, and then you can even go in there and say, hey, I want this 30-second snippet to be the kind of the teaser promo piece. And then from there, once you upload all different data, and then it goes, hey, you want to upload it on YouTube, BitChute, DTube, like basically you name it, Patreon, or not Brighteon, at the Mike Adams one. And then you can then say, hey, I want to post that snippet to whether it's Facebook, Twitter, all different platforms, but it's one fell swoop. And this is just some 20-year-old kid who only has like 15 subscribers. Apparently, I was the first person that paid like $3 a month, and then he made it free. So it'd be a good person to get in contact with.
What's it called?
Awesome. Yeah.
It's I've got to go look it up right now. It's like social media mega posting tool, but it's I'll go find it and get in touch.
Awesome. I knew that was coming. I knew there would be a day when we would have that.
If you go to try to post a Minds, if you go to try posting, let's say a Minds article on Facebook, it actually blocked me and said,
Yeah.
"Are you sure you want to do this?" And
Yeah.
this whole big deal.
Yeah.
So
All right, about 2 more minutes more. Yeah, thanks for that.
I just want to share one thing. Some of you will have heard of Gary Vaynerchuk. If you haven't heard of his 86-page content distribution guide, have you heard of that?
No?
It's something that I'll be looking into to start a business. But what he recommends, you create one big piece of content, like a 1-hour video or whatever. It's always the videos first.
And what he says is you put the video up and you get the people that view it to, when they're commenting on it on YouTube or whatever, write the timestamp of what content really resonated with them. So after the video, he'll record the audio file and upload it to his podcast, and then all the timestamps that he finds on the people who have commented, he takes those snippets, 10, 15 seconds, then he posts the videos on Instagram and Facebook, and then basically you've got one piece of 1 hour long content can actually go through multi-platform, and it's all native, and you basically have massive reach. So check out the 86-page Gary Vaynerchuk content guide.
You're saying it's really efficient as well, because you can turn one
Yeah.
area into like 100 different
Awesome, thank you for that addition. And then also the last part, Gary Vaynerchuk, what I love about him, he said, whatever business you're in that business / you're a media executive. We now live in the world, you can create your own video, audio, written text form, and we got the ideas that are rock solid, so please produce whatever it is you're passionate about. Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, any last words, Dan, or good?
Before I forget, can I get a picture with all you guys? Awesome. Thanks for being here, everybody. We all want truth. The truth will set you free.